Good evening, everybody. On behalf of the town of Timoth, I want to welcome you to the second part of the Spring Water Series. Appreciate everybody being here. I see a lot of familiar faces who were here for the first session. And we certainly appreciate the interest in this. I think the real reason you're all here perhaps is because the topic, among other things that we're going to hear, is what your HOA can't tell you you can't do. And and everybody likes to take a shot at their HOA, right? However, I happen to have been for 16 years now president of our HOA. I'm very surprised my 17 constituents aren't here because they never miss an opportunity to shoot a few arrows at me. So I'm Phil Goldstein. A couple times most months, I'm here along with my colleague in the middle seat there. I chair the Timoth Planning Commission. Marty Jost there is vice chair, and we've been serving the Planning Commission for a number of years. But more importantly, we've been privileged over these last several months to be part of a working group, a committee, if you will, that the town has chartered to begin looking at conservation measures. Certainly, you're here as proof of the fact that you take seriously this, let's call it a crisis, less water, higher prices for it. And if there's not evidence of how difficult this is, we only need to have lived through this last winter where we had precious little snow. So along with Marty and myself on this committee, we have two council members. Councilmember Bill Jenkins, who's here and was here at the last session. Mayor Pro Tem Luke Wagner serves on that. And then we have two staff members back in the back. We have Principal Planner Logan Graves and Planner Lindsay Jones. And as I did last time, because it bears very much saying so, Lindsay certainly did the lion's share of the work for this, and for which we very much appreciate. We also have communication specialist Ben Boddicker here, who helps us with the excellent publicity and mailings. Ben has indicated, I heard him mention at Tuesday's council meeting, that when this series concludes, these will be posted on the website. So for anybody who couldn't make it. So as I alluded to, this four-part series is the first effort of this committee. And initially, as evidenced by the topics last week, tonight, and 2 and 4 weeks hence, it's about education, letting residents know how they can be more efficient with water. I mentioned I see a lot of familiar faces. Just a couple thoughts from last time that I see with people with their notepads. We noticed couldn't help but notice many people taking notes last time, which spoke well of our presenter and the fact that people took it seriously. We also got some tremendous questions. We are keeping those. We're going to try and get through a lot of questions again tonight. We got a lot of questions which, for me, certainly gave us some ideas for future presentations, some of the things that people asked. I'd also be remiss in not acknowledging, tying that all together, is at least one person here took it very seriously. Councilmember Jenkins, I happened to run into him a day or two later after that session, and he indicated that he had noted some of the equipment, a controller, sprinkler nozzles, and went home, ordered these things, and then proceeded to take advantage of the rebates that the Water District offers, such that I believe he almost got everything for next to nothing, right? So Bill, I talked to Bill, and if anybody would like to hear firsthand after the meeting's over, he's indicated he would stick around for a few minutes. If you'd like to chat with him, that's still okay. He'd be happy to share with you, but as he did with me. So tonight's topic is Know Your Yard, Your Rights and Landscaping Rules. We had the previous session. We have 2 more sessions to come. March 14th, 2 weeks hence, is Transform Your Yard, Water-Wise Landscaping. We think that's also going to be an interesting subject. And then presently scheduled is the final session is Easy Ways to Save Water Inside Your Home. We're looking at some tweaking of that possibly, but stay tuned, as they say, and we'll keep you informed. Before I introduce our speaker, as we did last time, for those of you here, we have a Snappy Door Prize for one lucky contestant, if you will. We have a rain barrel. We don't have it here with us with such big demand, but whomever is our winner tonight from the giveaway coupons that you were given will be provided this rain barrel, which also doubles as a costume at Bronco games. For those of you, good, I'm glad somebody, they got that. Okay, all right, so a couple things by way of housekeeping. So that our presenter can get through all of his presentation, we ask not just hold your questions to the end, but write your questions if you have them down on the notepad that you have, and just raise your hand and one of our runners will collect that. We'll do as we last time, we'll sort through those and we'll try and get through as many questions as possible. Also, if you would, again, please limit your questions to the presenter's material. As I said last time, if you have questions at any time, and Councilmember Jenkins would tell you, Council very much welcomes public input, and there's a session specifically for that at every meeting. Planning Commission, which meets next Tuesday, also has public comment sessions. Limit your comment, but if you want to ask questions or make statements about town policy, you're welcome to come to those meetings and have an opportunity to do that. So, with no further ado, as they say, I'd like to introduce Darren Knowles. Darren is the Senior Water Efficiency Planner with Northern Water. He and his colleagues design and implement conservation programs in northern Colorado, and he's going to acquaint us with our rights as homeowners under Colorado's water-wise landscaping laws, including, as I promised, what your mean old HOA can and can't tell you you have to do or not do. So if you would, please welcome Darren Knowles.
Well, thank you all for being here, showing interest. I am really excited to talk with you, not only because I am incredibly passionate about water, as noted, my title is Senior Water Efficiency Planner, so I'm always thinking about water and being really a steward of water, but I am also a Timnath resident. So I actually just live right down the road on Rendezvous in the Trailside neighborhood. And so I've definitely, I've kind of taken advantage a little bit of our rights and our rules and implemented a water efficient landscape design in my front yard too. So I'm just on the corner of Dennis and Rendezvous if you want to come check out my garden. You'll notice that my garden looks a lot better than my grass because I don't really water my grass a lot. Again, trying to be as efficient as possible. I just haven't gotten around to replace my grass just yet. But so I really wanted to share, exactly like Phil said, some of our rights and what we can and can't do, and what our HOAs can and can't do in terms of controlling our landscape design and plant material that we choose to put in there. But first, really, I wanted to kind of set up the conversation with the why. Why are we talking about, why is the state kind of taking this initiative and making these laws, and really why should we care so much about water efficiency, especially on the landscape? So to tee that up, though, this might be a little unfair because you have to hold your questions until the end, but I have questions for you. And for any brave soul that does want to kind of answer and raise their hand, I do have little special prizes, little rewards. So if you have kids or grandkids or just a big fan of stickers and or plants, I have little rewards that if you want to raise your hand and join in the conversation. So my first question for you is, where does our water come it's a really broad question. There's a lot of different answers, and there's kind of not really one single right answer, but yes. Yeah, absolutely. You actually hit definitely something I'm about to talk about right off. So you definitely, here you go. You got some stickers. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there's more chances because I have a couple more questions too. Yeah, absolutely. West Slope. So headwaters of the Colorado. I'll talk a little bit about that too. And aquifers. There's certainly some groundwater. I'll talk a little bit less about groundwater. What else? There's definitely other right answers to where our water comes from. There you go. Yeah, I was hoping for that. Yeah, absolutely. It comes from our sky. It's in the form of rain, precipitation, snow. In fact, that's really kind of the bulk of the water in Colorado is snow, and then gets stored in our snowpack up in the mountains, and then precipitates, and then, or sorry, melts, and then runs off into our. Well, I guess I should keep it there because there's other right questions. But do you mind passing the other brave soul there? Yeah. Any other ideas of kind of where our water comes from? Or? Nailed it. Yeah. So once it snows or rains, especially in the snow, snowpack melts, runs off to the rivers and fills our reservoirs, and so that's a bulk of really kind of where our municipal supply comes from, especially in this region, which I'll definitely talk a little bit about. So stickers too. You got it. All right, so I guess I can move on to because I think we hit really the main points of where our water comes from. So, like I said, I'm the senior water efficiency planner for Northern Water. How many of you are familiar with who Northern Water is? How many of you heard of Northern Water? Okay, good. That's great. So hopefully for good reasons. Um, So we are a supplemental water provider of Northern Colorado. So we collect and deliver a lot of the water that we consume here in the region. And we do that really by sourcing it from the West Slope. So at the headwaters of the Colorado River, we have a few reservoirs where we store all that snowpack and then run it underneath Rocky Mountain National Park through the Alva B. Adams Tunnel over here to the East Slope in the Front Range, and then through a series of canals and pipes and rivers and reservoirs. We distribute it to a number of different municipalities and agriculture users and special districts and water provider districts really across the region. So this is a great map of really the entire system that you can see from the West Slope all the way out to the Nebraska border. And so all told, we have roughly 30 or so municipalities that receive this water, and then a number of special districts, and then a bunch of agriculture users. In that area, we have about a population of a little over 1 million folks living there, and I think the key thing, I already said it, it's supplemental water. So it's not meant to be the main source of water supply for any one single individual entity. It's really meant to be there as kind of a safeguard and to help really kind of fill the gap and meet the needs that the native water supplies or the rivers that flow naturally on this side of the divide, like the South Platte and the Poudre, really meet that gap. And it's particularly important in what we're experiencing right now in this drought. So it's really, really crucial water to really make sure that the region can continue to grow, but also to remain kind of as functional and vibrant as it already is. So I also wanted to kind of ask another question, and again, stickers, but how, again, it's a really general question, but how is Colorado's water used? Who uses it? For what purposes? Agriculture. Yep, that is a big one. Recreation. Yes, absolutely. That is another really important one. In the reservoirs and the rivers, anglers, boaters, whitewater rafters, tons and tons of recreation. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, municipal. It's drinking water. It's we use it because water is life, right? So it is the backbone of how we survive, and so that is exactly right. So the municipal water usage, they treat it and deliver it to us so that we can actually access it just at a flick of the tap. Any other uses you can think of? Yes, bingo. That is quite yeah, exactly. Yeah, more than just indoor, but it's also outdoor. It's what we use to water a lot of our landscape. And that is going to be the main theme for this presentation. All right, so I think we hit probably on a lot of the big uses. Um, and so this is again just a kind of quick snapshot of kind of how water is used, how it's distributed, really. So, according to the 2023 Colorado Water Plan, of all of the water that is really kind of starts here in Colorado, we're a headwater state. So all of the water that starts here kind of flows down the mountain and out. So of all that water that starts here, we use about 40% of it here in Colorado. The rest goes downstream to other downstream users. So of the water that stays in Colorado, 90% is used in and then the other 10% is really split between municipal and industrial. So I guess that's another important use, right, is powering our businesses and those industrial uses. But really in this region, again, just focusing on, I guess I erred in saying that the name of our system that brings the water from the Colorado headwaters over onto this east slope is the Colorado Big Thompson Project. So all of that Colorado Big Thompson Project, of that, it's more or less 50-50 in terms of usage of that municipal and industrial and the agriculture. If you're zooming out and not just focusing on the Colorado Big Thompson or CBT, it's more like 75% ag to the 25% municipal and industrial, but really just focusing kind of on kind of the CBT usage. It's about half and half. All right, last question I got for you. Why is it important to conserve water on our landscape? Yeah, absolutely. And yep, I will kind of, yeah, just teed me up for my next slide to talk about that. Saving money, yeah, totally. I think that's important for sure, and I think that we can all use, especially in times like these with the cost escalations, can absolutely use a little help in saving money. Any other thoughts or ideas? Or you just really don't want stickers? That's fine. Hopefully, it's a little bit. I guess it is. It's about the same size, but so I guess to talk about how much it uses. It uses a ton. So about half of the water, that municipal water that we treat and is delivered to the end user is used on the landscape. And then according to the US EPA WaterSense program, about half of all of that water that's used on our landscape is wasted. It's lost due to evaporation or just completely runs off our landscape. And so that is quite a bit of water that is really just kind of wasted. A lot of that is put onto the inappropriate landscape. So what we call non-functional turf. You could also call it non-essential turf because many would argue, rightly so, that grass does serve a function in a way as it can provide cooling benefits, stormwater management, but it is not necessarily better than the alternative, which I'll talk about. But if we really want to talk about kind of what non-functional turf is, it does not provide any recreational value. There aren't any practical uses. It's strictly used for ornamental purposes. There's some really funny ways that different water providers across the country have communicated to define non-functional turf. One of my favorites is when Southern Nevada Water Authority in Las Vegas, basically their, I guess, public information officer went around town and tried to play Frisbee on a bunch of non-functional turf. And I don't think you'd want to play Frisbee in the middle of a highway, just on these medians that are just, you can't water that appropriately. I think that, I can't remember, I think it was Denver Water, it could have been somebody else, but you wouldn't put your baby on it, probably not functional. So I don't know if I'd want to put my 1-year-old on any of these narrow areas right next to the street. So there are other, and we'll get to that, but there's other definitions of non-functional, or other, applications, but these are kind of the major culprits of, they're on these narrow street strips, and especially when there are no trees. Certainly the one on the far right, there are trees, so you could argue that it's not that bad. It's not as bad as these other twos because it's getting shade, so it requires a little bit less water. And when you're applying that water, you're watering the trees. So there is at least, some vindication on that, but that narrow strip of grass by the storm drain, I mean, how do you water that effectively without just having water going immediately down the storm drain? So, so non-functional turf, we're seeing this non-functional turf and turf-dominant landscape really, come to a lot of the developments, and it just has been kind of the de facto landscape that we've put in all of our homes and businesses for quite some time. And many would argue, we used Kentucky bluegrass as the most common one. And that certainly has its benefits that I will probably touch on a little bit later. But it is by no means native or kind of appropriate to the climate, arid climate that we live in, and really kind of plains. So it's really not necessarily kind of the natural landscape. So we definitely want to move towards more of a natural landscape. And I probably don't need to tell any of you, if you live in Timnath for any period of time, that we are growing in this region. We're one of the fastest, well, probably the fastest growing regions in the state of Colorado. And you can see just in a 10-year period, the total population of the entire Northern Water District grew by 32% from 2010 to 2020. And then we have, and it's still growing. So just in the period of 2020 to 2023, we had 4 of the top 10 fastest growing cities in Colorado. Those are, I think, defined as 20,000 population 20,000 or above. But the 9 of the top 10 growing communities as a whole in terms of percentage, Timnath, Severance being very fast, growing very, very, very fast. So this is all good in a way in that it creates more businesses, more jobs, but with those jobs, there's more homes. And if we are installing the same landscape that we have been, that puts more pressure on our municipal water supply. So we're still kind of using that same model, and so we're just basically growing and growing and growing. And unfortunately, water is a finite resource, and it has to be shared between a bunch of different uses. We already talked about agriculture is using a lot of that, especially in our region. Agriculture is such an incredibly important historical premise really for anyone living here in the first place, and is really a driver of the economic growth over the history of the settlement of this region. And so more and more municipal growth has led to agriculture dry up, so fewer farms and kind of that land moving to the residential developments and water moving to. So really all of that is to say that, again, water is a finite resource. It has to be shared, and because it needs to be shared, and because that puts a lot of pressure on some users more than others, we really need to do our part in order to ensure that we can all continue to really enjoy the benefits of living in this amazing state, in this amazing region, and ensure that we still have the ability to have access to local food and all of the wonderful recreational benefits that our streams and lakes and reservoirs have to offer. So kind of that is a big, broad way of kind of paraphrasing what the state has really said in a lot of the different legislation that they've passed over the few years about the importance of water and why we need to conserve water, especially on the landscape. So I wanted to, obviously, now the bulk of the conversation is about what those pieces of legislation, what are the most important pieces of legislation. So I'm so glad that this was just kind of by happenstance that y'all will be entered into that raffle to win a rain barrel, because since 2016, they are legal in Colorado to actually have a rain barrel. Before 2016, it was not legal to capture any amount of water off of your residential rooftop and collect it for usage on your property. But thanks to House Bill 16-1005, every residential property is allowed a maximum of 2 rain barrels to collect no more than 110 gallons total that must be collected from residential rooftops. So there is a specific way to kind of design the collection of the different rain barrels, or a collection of the water and distribute into the rain barrels. And it must be used on the property where it has been collected. And it is strictly used just for outdoor. So I don't think you'd really want to use it to brush your teeth or, for drinking water, but they felt that it was important to really call that out, that you really shouldn't be using it inside. And there is a time period of kind of how long you can store it before you have to use it. And I can't remember it off the top of my head. I probably should have added it to that slide so I'd be reminded. But basically, you can't just collect water in perpetuity. You have to use it in a certain time. And there's definitely plenty of best practices to collect rainwater through rain barrels, because without the proper setup on the rain barrel, it can also be a mosquito farm. So there's definitely a lot of ways that you should really consider if you are to put a rain barrel on your property. And so knowing that it is kind of more, it's not terribly complex, it's definitely a DIY opportunity that anyone can really install it. It's not always the most easy. So luckily, the Colorado Water Center at Colorado State University has a ton of resources on their website for how to install, the best materials to use. And I would also say too, not to get too far off topic, but talking about rain barrels and kind of rainwater harvesting, if you will, rain gardens, designing and implementing rain gardens are also a really, really great way of using the precipitation to irrigate your yard without relying on sprinklers and using the municipal water supply. And the Colorado Water Center has put a ton of time into developing resources and plans and designs for those rain gardens. But back to rain barrels, they also put together a really, really great guidebook, basically, on best practices for those rain barrels. So whoever wins that raffle, you're already halfway there. But you can definitely go here if you want to know how exactly to install it. I guess to kind of segue into the next topic, I am not exactly sure on how HOAs can or cannot regulate the installation of rain barrels, but the state does say that you are absolutely allowed to. And so I would hope that any HOA with, maybe a little prodding would certainly have to allow you to do it, at least behind a fence, if there's any conflict or issue with a design guideline of that HOA. Because let's be honest, I mean, the blue rain barrels like these, are these the ones that would be a really good costume at a Broncos game? Because it's kind of the Broncos blue. Yeah, it's not for everybody. But you could also, maybe paint it the same color as your house, or something like that, or hire a local artist to put like a mini mural on it. All right, this is probably going to be the most, I don't know, popular is the right way, but maybe this is what you all came for. So this next piece of legislation is very complex. So I am really kind of boiling it down to a very broad application. But this is essentially called Water-Wise Landscaping in HOAs. It was Senate Bill 23-178. So this was just passed in 2023. So it basically tells what HOAs can and cannot do in terms of regulating homeowners' landscape. Again, in essence, the state is very clear in the intent of this legislation and this law that has been passed, that they want to ensure that homeowners have rights to install climate appropriate, climate adaptive, low water landscapes in their properties. So again, to boil this down to very, very, very simplified language, HOAs cannot prohibit the use of artificial turf in backyards. I could talk forever about artificial turf. I think this is great to keep it in backyards if you have the right application. So personally, I think it's kind of great that they aren't regulating or allowing HOAs to regulate the installation of artificial turf in front yards, because it can also be a different aesthetic. I'll leave it at that. But there's also a ton of other considerations with artificial turf, which I will not get into. HOAs also, and when I say HOAs, I'm also talking about metro districts, or really they say common interest associations. So HOAs technically cannot require hardscape or turf grass, so that Kentucky bluegrass, cool season grass, on more than 20% of landscape. So basically, and on the next slide, I kind of have the opposite. But also, something that this legislation prohibited HOAs from doing is prohibiting vegetable gardens in front, back, or side yards. So HOAs, if you want to put raised bed or raised garden for vegetables, herbs, or any other kind of edible landscape that would qualify as a kind of vegetable garden, you can do it, and the HOA really more or less has to allow you. However, HOAs can still enforce design or aesthetic guidelines, including plant lists. So when I did my installation in my front yard, I didn't remove any grass. I took out a lot of rock, a lot of river rock. And so I became quite familiar with the plant list and the design guidelines of my HOA. And honestly, I will say I think they did a really good job of it. They have a very clear list. There's a lot of perennials, a lot of water-wise some natives. So really, really good list. I think part of it also is that they require, and I can't remember if it's 60 or 80%, but they require a certain percentage on the higher end that of all of the plants you're going to be planting in a garden and design must come from that signature plant list of the HOA to kind of keep that common aesthetic of the neighborhood consistent throughout all of the yards. But I love that they at least allow some derivation from that plant list so they can give you a little bit of leeway into making it your own. So I definitely took advantage of that. They also must allow at least 80% of landscape to be drought tolerant plantings. So this is where there can be a little bit of wiggle room if people interpret this language a little bit differently. So technically, Kentucky bluegrass is drought tolerant. It's actually one of the great things about Kentucky bluegrass. But Kentucky bluegrass has its place in those recreational areas, in the really high value landscapes where people are gathering, they're having picnics, they're playing and having a blast. It also has a great place in people's backyards or anywhere where kids and dogs play. And so when we're in a drought like we are now, when and if water restrictions come on and we have to water it less, it'll survive, it'll be fine. Again, great thing about Kentucky bluegrass is that it has this dormancy mechanism, so it will kind of look like it's dead, it kind of acts dead, plays dead, but it's just asleep. And once you keep watering, it'll come back. So the reason I bring that up is that, yeah, folks could probably maybe try to argue that, oh, well, Kentucky bluegrass is drought tolerant. The spirit of the law clearly is about limiting the amount of turf grass. So I wouldn't say that there is much ground to stand on with that argument, but I've definitely heard of folks try. And then the last thing about this legislation that I'll say that it requires HOAs to have at least 3 pre-approved water-wise designs. There's a bunch of ways that they can get around this, or not get around it, but there's a bunch of ways that they can implement this. I think when this was originally passed, we heard from a lot of HOAs that were really, really concerned that we don't have the money to pay a landscape designer to put in these, or to design these water-wise designs. And then there's also that concern, well, then every house will have the exact same design if we only have 3 of them. So one way, I guess there's really multiple different ways of kind of allowing for that and really alleviating any of those concerns. There are a ton of water-wise landscape design resources. So I would say HOAs can definitely use these and just say, hey, anything that's available on Northern Waters landscape templates or Plant Select's landscape templates, if they're adapted and amended to be installed, they're fine, they're allowed, those are pre-approved, no problem whatsoever when you go through that architectural design review committee. And then I'm pointing out Resource Central here. I believe Fort Collins Loveland Water District, I'm not sure about Elko, but certainly Fort Collins Loveland works with Resource Central to offer garden in a box design or garden in a box discounts. So it's a great resource. Garden in a box it's like this pre-planned garden in a box, even though that's a bit of a misnomer because you don't get a box, you get a couple flats of plants. And with that, you get a plant and care guide that gives you all the instructions on how to plant and take care of this, plus the actual design itself. So an HOA could even say anything that you get on a garden in a box could be a pre-approved design. But this is a great resource, certainly for HOAs, but these are great resources for residents as well. All right, just a couple more kind of pieces of legislation that I kind of want to talk about here. And this might be less applicable maybe to this audience, but I think that it's an indication of kind of where we're headed as a state. So this was a big deal. This called Prohibit Landscaping Practices for Water Conservation. They get very creative with their legislation names, but really it's SB 24005. I pretty much just refer to it as SB 5 because it's really kind of a landmark piece of legislation. I would say the history of Colorado, water-wise, landscaping. But in essence, this legislation directs local governments, any local municipality that has, or any special district, anyone that has local planning use authority, it instructs them to prohibit the installation of any non-functional turf and non-functional artificial turf as well. Like I said, there are concerns about artificial turf, which made its way into this legislation, and it also, pretty much prohibiting any invasive plant species. Kind of a broad term because there's plenty of plants that we love that are invasive, technically. But this is all specifically for new development. It really directs those communities to kind of restrict this in new development. So this does not apply really to existing development unless there is a redevelopment project, which here. But again, new development of specifically commercial, institutional, industrial, or common interest associations. So HOAs are kind of part of this. And they took an interesting tack in defining what non-functional turf is. I would say they kind of took two different directions. One, they defined very clearly what functional turf is, which is anything that can be used for programmed recreation and community value, gathering spots, anything you're going to walk on and really appreciate and adds value. They also kind of defined this non-functional turf really by the location that you would plant grass. So think street rights of way, parking lots, medians, and transportation corridors, but pretty much anything that is narrow, close to the sidewalk or the road, or right in the middle of the road, they're defining really as non-functional because usually it's a lot hotter when you get closer to that stuff, so it requires more water. But then it's also, as the more narrow you get, the more difficult it is to irrigate, and so you're just wasting that water on the sidewalk or into the street and going down the storm drain. But this would also apply basically to any redevelopment, and redevelopment is defined as any project that would redevelop 50% of a given landscape. So again, probably not that applicable, but I think that it really does show kind of the future of kind of where we're headed, which lo and behold, in 2025, the state legislature came back and passed additional legislation to really talk about residential. Because if you notice, this was only on kind of that commercial side of things and didn't really touch residential as much. But this is where kind of the state kind of circled back around to it and extended the SB 5 requirements of non-functional turf to new and redeveloped multifamily properties. So kind of getting its way into the residential area. And then it also required some level of non-functional turf restriction on new and residential landscapes by 2028. And this is, I say some level, it's really up to the local entity to define what those non-functional turf in a residential setting really should be. And when I say residential setting, I'm really talking about those, single-family homes, their front yards in particular. There are certainly communities around the state that have actually already gone so far as to ban or significantly limit any turf grass or Kentucky bluegrass, cool season grass in people's front yards. Castle Rock and Aurora and a couple others were really the trendsetters there. So I wouldn't be surprised if more communities are actually going to take this tack before 2028. But that 2028 deadline seems like pretty far off, but and I'm glad that it is, because it really gives local planners a lot more time to prepare for that rather than the original SB 5. But all of this, again, really is to basically say that, the state's paying attention, they're taking action. And I think they're perhaps maybe sometime in the future, they're a little bit busy talking about the budget this year. But they might revisit this kind of area with kind of residential landscape in the future. But certainly it demonstrates that they are very much taking water efficiency and water conservation very seriously. So also really, really wanted to talk a lot about resources available. So to take a step back and kind of talk about Northern Water, again, we're a regional water provider, so we don't have a lot of interaction directly with the end user, the residential customers. So really all of our programs are designed for the commercial users and HOAs and especially HOAs, but businesses and places of worship and municipalities themselves. So this might not apply to really everyone in the audience, but if you are on an HOA board or own a business, this certainly would apply to you. But certainly Northern Water, we're here as resources to really help steward kind of the transition from the turf dominant landscape to more climate appropriate water efficient landscape. I'll kind of talk about and define in just a little bit. But we have landscape consultations, again, for those non-residential properties. And so, yeah, so if you do serve on an HOA board or have a business or anything like that, this is going to be a very popular service. It already is breaking records for our intake forms. So happy to talk a little bit more about that afterwards. And then we also offer, once someone goes through a landscape consultation, they're eligible to apply for a collaborative water efficient landscape grant, which offers up to $25,000 in matching funds to either change landscapes or remove some grass and put in a more water-wise landscape or garden, like you can see here on the left in the before and after photo that was taken in the city of Fort Collins, or for an irrigation retrofit. Again, we recognize that there are definitely valuable areas of cool season grass, but perhaps they could just be watered a little bit more efficiently to help save some water, and oftentimes help the health really of the grass itself. So we'll offer some funding for irrigation retrofits. And really the whole key here is to create a whole host of satellite demonstration gardens. So I'll talk about it in just a second, what we have on campus, but we also have this grant story map. So this is a great resource if you're looking for inspiration, if you want to put water-wise landscaping in at your home, you want a little bit of inspiration, you want to see it firsthand. You don't have to go too terribly far. I think you mostly have to go into Fort Collins or some in Windsor, but you can scan this and you can really explore all the different projects that we have funded in the past. We've now done we've done exactly 100 since 2019. And really, all of this is kind of a movement away from, again, that turf-dominant landscape to more climate-appropriate landscapes, to be a little bit more, I guess, reflective of kind of the natural landscape of what Colorado used to look like before it was settled. And so how many of you are familiar with the term xeriscape? Yeah. I guess, how many of you have a pretty positive association with that term, xeriscape? Yes, there you go. Thank you. Yes, I'm saying xeriscape, not xeroscape. And I think that has been kind of a challenge. That's been one of the barriers in our, approach to trying to transition to a more climate adaptive landscape and climate appropriate landscape. Because oftentimes when folks hear xeriscape, they hear xeroscape, which they think is just a bunch of rocks and maybe a couple cactus, which is definitely not at all the case. So there's been a lot of movement towards kind of changing that mindset via kind of a little rebranding. So not using the term xeriscape using something called Coloradoscape. This is just kind of starting to become used, and so isn't necessarily defined really consistently across the state. And I would argue that Coloradoscape means something different wherever you go in the state because we have a bunch of different climates and growing regions within the state. What grows down here does not necessarily grow well at 9, 10, 11,000 feet in elevation. So every local area will have kind of its own version of Coloradoscape. But broadly speaking, a Coloradoscape is water-wise, so it uses less water certainly than that Kentucky bluegrass. It's full of native and or adapted plants, so things that are meant to survive here, meant to be planted here. They're, again, climate resilient, and it provides beauty and color. It's not just a bunch of rock and a couple cactus. You get the color, you get those, you get the winter interest too. Sometimes, you know, if you keep grasses, those ornamental grasses high, they give you like this really cool winter interest. It creates habitat for pollinators. And ideally, it's lower maintenance. It's different maintenance. It can be sometimes more involved, but a lot of the time of the year, you're not really touching it. Maybe the occasional, if you plant it right, maybe the occasional weed, you know, pulling the weeds. But, you know, versus mowing your lawn and fertilizing and aerating and doing all the things you have to make sure that it keeps green, you're doing week in and week out. It's really, if you add up all that time, it's lower maintenance. I can't tell you how much more time I spend trying to maintain. At least, you know, I beat the heck out of my lawn, so I guess I can't complain too terribly much. But I still, you know, mow it every couple of weeks and, you know, bag the clippings and just redistribute much of the clippings as well, and try to fertilize as much as I can and aerate. It's very time consuming every week or two. But my garden, again, the occasional weed I pull, but otherwise it's a spring cleanup and then maybe a little bit of a fall preparation just to kind of put it to bed for the winter. So this is Coloradoscape, right? Not Xeriscape necessarily. So we're trying to move in that direction. And really at Northern Water, we're located in Berthoud. We have this whole conservation garden really set up to demonstrate what Coloradoscape looks like, what is appropriate for our landscape. So I would invite all of you to come and check it out. We have tons of different demonstrations. We're working on new ones to install. It's open sun up to sundown every day of the week. In addition to the demonstrations, we also demonstrate the best management practices really of turf. Again, we recognize that there is a value of turf in the right place. And we also offer tours to get a better understanding of all the different demonstrations and some of the plants. So that's Lindsay Nerad wearing the yellow vest there, and she is an expert. She is the designer of that kind of front and center design of the streetscape, or street strip and median. There's 6 different little designs right there. So she is a joy to get a tour from. But you also don't have to wait for a tour. I mean, you can always come. Like I said, it's open every day of the week from sun to sundown. But we're also going to be hosting the Conservation Gardens Fair on June 13th. Again, 220 Water Avenue in Berthoud. It's a lot of fun if you haven't been there. This is actually the second year since COVID, but we'll have a few experts giving talks. We'll have a ton of different information booths and demos, activities, bring the kids and the grandkids, because there's a lot of fun giveaways and free plants too. So yeah, really hope to see you there. And yeah, it'll be a really fun day. Okay, so last, I kind of just want to do a little pop quiz. It allows me to also get a little bit more back up on my soapbox, but maybe there's some stickers too. I mean, I think at this point, I brought plenty of stickers, so if you want some, you can definitely have them. Don't worry. But so I just wanted to show you kind of a series of pictures, and you tell me, does that fit the criteria of Coloradoscape? Yeah. that's kind of an easy one, right? I already showed that picture, and I kind of use it as a model for non-functional turf. But there's some clovers in there too, so that's kind of nice. Maybe one day the clovers will take over. Next up, we got some prairie coneflower and some ornamental grasses, really well planted. I think that's at the CSU Spur campus. What do you think? Colorado scape or no? Yeah, totally. Good eye. All right, what about this? Yeah, there you go. That's xeriscaping, right? That's actually, I mean, I would say I kind of like that aesthetic, but it doesn't belong in Colorado. It's Arizona scape. There it is. Yeah. I mean, like, I will point out too, just again going off on a little bit of a tangent. Yeah, right, exactly. No, no. Yeah, yeah. Maybe get some plastic ones. It's non-vegetative uh, plant material. But I will say that they have demonstrated, while the plant material is not Colorado scape, they've demonstrated one thing really, really well, and something that I really love is the proper use of kind of rock mulch. So wood mulch again has its places and applications, but that gorilla hair mulch a lot of times will just kind of bunch up, and when it rains, that water is either going to get absorbed by the mulch itself or just kind of run off because it becomes hydrophobic. So we're really, really recommending the use of rock mulch. When we say rock mulch, we're not talking about those river rocks there on the edges. We're actually talking about something called squeegee or pea gravel, like much smaller rocks. If you lay it on thick enough, 3-4 inches, maybe even 5 inches deep, it also suppresses weeds, but it also allows water to percolate in, and it gets to that soil. It's great. Again, I have that modeled at my yard. Maybe I should put my yard on the Grant Story map, even though I didn't get any money for it. But yeah, I've used squeegee in there, and again, I spend practically no time pulling weeds in that garden. So it's great. But then also something I'll notice, or that I'll just point out too, in this is they do incorporate river rocks in there. And that's just on the edge, and that's to keep some of that squeegee and the pea gravel from getting out into the sidewalk and become maybe like a little bit of a hazard here. But yeah, so anyway, I think it looks cool, but it's probably not appropriate here. I don't have a lot of like succulents and cactus and stuff in my garden. But so yeah, it's probably good in Arizona, but maybe not Colorado scape for sure. How about this? Yeah, good, excellent. Okay. I was a little bit nervous when I was reviewing these slides because there's a lot more rock in here too, but yeah, it's not a bunch of, yeah, exactly. But there's a lot more kind of native or adapted plants here too. And one thing I'll just point out too is that the ornamental grasses there, that's Blonde Ambition, Blue Grama, one of my favorite grasses and really cool winter interest. So I have that in my garden whenever I go to cut it down in the spring. I feel so bad. I can't get rid of it. I can't bring myself to get rid of it, so I have to put it in like a little planter, just because I think it just looks so cool. But it's just like this golden, waving seed heads really throughout the winter. But yeah, so you nailed it. Colorado scape, absolutely. How about this? Trick question. So actually, and so this is a trick question just because this is native grass. So this is actually a blend of buffalo blue grama. It looks like turf grass because, and this is in the first year after it was planted. So I intentionally, tried to trick you with this one just so I can kind of show off this project. This is one of our grant projects. This is probably the best native grass installations I've ever seen because native grass is rife with challenges. Thanks to the guy that was managing this, he put 100 hours of his own time in hand-picking the weeds so that the grass seeds had enough space to kind of outcompete the weeds. So it was a great job. This is a blend of blue grama and buffalo grass. And so it is maybe not meeting all of the thresholds of Colorado scape, but it's definitely appropriate. And in this climate, especially since nobody's actually walking on that. It again, also looks really, really cool the winter too. Some would say browns down, but I think it becomes golden. Another trick question. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, I'm glad that you kind of looked a little bit deeper in this. So this is something called Tahoma 31. So this is a warm season Bermuda grass. Yeah, Bermuda in Colorado. Really weird, right? Tahoma 31. I know. I wish I had actually put it up on the slide, but Tahoma Tahoma 31. So again, Bermuda, but it's a cold, hardy. Oklahoma State University did a phenomenal job of studying a whole host of different Bermuda grasses, and through their whole trial, this was the one that really raised to the top. It survived the winter, cold, harsh climate, and uses half at most of the water of a connector. So, in terms of it being water-wise, check. That's definitely, I would say, and it is climate adapted, even if it's not native. And for those folks that are looking for something that, and maybe if you can kind of trick your HOA too, maybe if you don't want to go through the hassle of the fight, you want to keep your grass, you can just kind of do a like for like swap to Tahoma 31. It's a little bit more expensive than Kentucky bluegrass, but it is definitely cheaper than putting in like a water-wise garden, a lot of plant material and mulch and rock and all that kind of stuff. So there are a ton of different growers around the area that will come in, take out your grass, amend the soil, and then roll out the new sod. And then, but I guess it only takes a week to establish. I guess that's my cue, I guess. Well, perfect time. There we go. Well, thank you so much for all of that and for letting me kind of go off on some tangents. So yeah, happy to take any questions or take down my email address if you want to ask.
Everybody have their questions submitted? Lindsay? Okay.
Okay, oh, great.
You want to bring those up to us and we'll read, yeah.
Oh, this is a good one, though. All right, so basically the question is, they installed artificial turf in their backyard, but the Metro says that they're required at least 40% live ground cover in their backyard. So the questions are, can artificial turf be counted as live ground cover? And can my HOA Metro require 40% live ground cover in my backyard? And what about the front yard? So I guess I can go back to slides here. Yeah, so I guess the answer to the first question, can artificial turf be counted as live ground cover? No. It's definitely non-vegetative plant ground cover. And so that's definitely explicit. But according to this piece of legislation, HOA cannot prohibit the use of artificial. They can enforce design or aesthetic guidelines, including those plant lists. Certainly in the front yard. So I guess this is kind of a gray area to, strictly by the, terms of the legislation and the law. But certainly in the spirit of the law, I think they're pretty clearly saying that you can kind of you can definitely install that artificial turf in the backyard. But I might, if whoever asked that question, if you took down my email address, and feel free to kind of email me that question, I can look a little bit deeper too in the law and see if there's anything else in the legislation that I'm missing. I would say we should really
So to that point, though, I've done some research on that, and I think it seems like the only time the an HOA can really prevent you from drought tolerant grasses is if, with aesthetics, if they're just not a very attractive grass, or the big thing would be if they're very invasive. You would have to have some buffering between the yards to prevent that from going in. Okay. So, first question, what might be next in the way of further state mandates?
What might be next in the way of state mandates?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you mentioned 28 for residential and
Yeah. So that is really more of a deadline for the local municipalities. So that 2028, kind of mandating a municipality or anyone with a local land use authority to impose some sort of restriction of. But I mean, I think that my gut says it's going to be less statewide. I think certainly right now, the state legislature certainly has their hands full. And so who knows what happens in the future, certainly. But I could see a lot more probably on the local side of things. 100%. I am so glad that you brought that up, and I'm really glad to hear that the town is working on that because I think that's honestly, yeah. Yeah. 100% agree. I mean, I think that you hit on non-potable, and I think that's also a really important kind of aspect. That's certainly the future. I think of a lot of new developments. I've heard of more developers from the very get-go designing more of that non-pot system. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. But then in terms of the kind of the smart irrigation. So one thing I didn't bring up is that the state had actually passed a law that requires the sale of only smart controllers or a WaterSense certified. That was passed a couple years ago, and it's looking like this year they've actually rescinded that requirement, that mandate, for a variety of reasons, mostly based off of kind of the response from the landscaping industry. Rightfully so, they're absolutely right in saying that there are a lot of challenges in implementing kind of those smart water in terms of needing access to Wi-Fi and all of that. But I think on the residential side, I'm really hoping that maybe it's revisited. If nothing else, I think that we'll see more and more incentives from local water providers to incentivize if they don't already have an incentive for. I heard Fort Collins Loveland has that smart controllers and rotary nozzles, and I think there's going to be more and more of that type of incentive. And I also just want to point out too, to the point of those HOAs, those metro districts, Northern Water has resources for those folks. They're within the district boundaries, receiving kind of the CBT water. They're eligible to get help.
So I have a next question here. Can you clarify if a metro district or an HOA can mandate that we, as homeowners, must have some amount of turf grass in our front yard?
So yeah, I mean, back to that legislation, they can mandate up to 20%. They can say you have a maximum, or they have a maximum. Oops. Yeah, and then I kind of threw it in here as a kind of contrary to this. They must allow at least 80% of landscape to be drought tolerant plantings. So they do have kind of that. There's like an open area that, yeah, they say specifically, yeah, totally, of the hardscape, but they can, yeah, right on.
So another question. I've been told repeatedly that Xeriscape or Coloradoscape of the entire yard is not allowed, and we must have some turf grass related to the last question.
I mean, again, yeah, technically they can say, yeah, you can't put kind of a water-wise landscape in the entire landscape. And it is kind of, so they do have that 80% kind of fallback. But still, I mean, that is a significant portion of the landscape. You can still put water-wise landscape in. Yeah, exactly. That's a really good point. There's Tahoma 31. There are other kind of, quote unquote, water-wise grasses, but I think Tahoma 31s are really good. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that Tahoma 31 is absolutely a great. Yeah, you got to do the turf, or you got to do the sod. Yeah, and there's something to be said. It depends on the aesthetics, right, of what you really want. And so, because it's a warm season, it doesn't naturally want to be green when it's cool. Like Kentucky bluegrass likes to be green in the spring and fall. Tahoma 31 usually greens up in June, but given the heat, I know Tahoma 31's already starting to green up right now. So there's that aesthetic, and I would be really curious to hear how the town tests that out and see how it stands up to that recreational use, especially kind of on a more year-round, or at least spring through fall. Mm, yeah. I think I would be way more concerned about the salt, maybe, but I don't know, maybe your use.
It's one of those where the research I've done is it's more salt tolerant than bluegrass, certainly. And the problem in this part of the country is there's a lot of salt in the soil, and if you're on non-potable, there's even more salt that's going down on it. So it's a bit more tolerant, but there's a point with the shade where it doesn't tend to like shade as much. I mean, it'll put up with some, but if you're heavily shaded, it's just not going to work.
That said, I would say that, and I think that no matter what, I mean, Tahoma 31 is a very, very, very new solution. So I think that there definitely needs to be more research in terms of like exactly finding the right applications every time. But I think I would be less worried about the heat issue, or sorry, less worried about the shade issue on like a street strip, because those are, even with the shade, tends to be a lot warmer areas, those microclimates, just because of all the pavement around it. So I would imagine, again, not having any research to that point, I would think to your point, I think that it tolerates some shade, but I think the some shade tolerance plus the heat, I think it would actually probably like it. But it also depends on how mature the trees are too, and how much shade they're putting out. But yeah, more. I think there's going to be a lot more to become. I'm just glad to hear though that more folks are testing it out and trying it in different applications. I know the city of Lafayette is also doing the same thing, testing it out in certain parks before they go citywide.
Are there any agencies or other nonprofit entities that one can consult for advice on what the HOA and Metro can and can't mandate? I guess more the interpretation and.
Yeah, because it's complicated for sure. Oh boy. Yeah, have they been in terms of kind of the legal kind of elements? Okay, great. I'm glad to hear that. I was gonna say, yeah, the first thing before I heard kind of more about the application of the laws and everything, I would say yes. So CSU Extension is a great resource for pretty much anything landscape related. And I know that they do also work with homeowners in the residential application that Northern Water isn't able to necessarily support. And then, on that topic too, less so on kind of the legal side. I know Resource Central has a lot of great resources as well. And then, like I had a slide earlier, the Colorado Water Center also has some great resources. Again, maybe not necessarily specifically for the legal application or implications of some of the legislation.
So there's one here, it's more of a statement. It said, would like to urge the metro districts or HOAs to waive the, in this case, 175 approval for landscape design and apply it to the efforts for Colorado scaping. I think I can, it's more of a statement than a question, but that's up to the individual HOAs and metros for the homeowners to bring that up with them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The one thing that came to mind too in hearing that statement is to kind of definitely pay attention to the rules and I guess standards of each individual metro and HOA, because I know when I put my garden in, I saw that there was a rule that if there's any landscape change that covers less than, I think it was 25% of the total landscape area, there was no fee. So yeah, so to your point, they allowed for that. They yeah, and so then that, but not all exactly. Yeah, so definitely pay attention, and then if your metro district does have that going for them, that like there's a certain threshold. Um, hopefully a tree is. There you go. Unless it's yeah, depends. Yeah, depends on the tree, right?
So,
Excuse me.
that was all the questions we had, but I have one, if I'm allowed one myself.
Of course.
There was one of the Kens and Cannots that you did. I thought was interesting. It was about the like gardens, raised beds. It really allows you to have one like in your front yard. Yep.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, I wish I had my notes because I actually copied and pasted a lot of yeah. They list out like herbs and stuff like that. One quick last thing that I just wanted to touch on too in kind of the previous conversation about fees and everything like that. And like I said, our HOA allows for no fee if you're only amending 25%. And I think that that's a really good rule if you have it. And I think that it's also just kind of a recommendation of best, maybe not always a best practice, but if you're thinking financially, these projects can be expensive to take out grass and then put in. So it's always good to kind of think about that planning long-term and phasing projects too. So especially, yeah, if you can take advantage of a rule like ours that's, 25%, each year you can take on 25%.